When Leo dropped to one knee in the middle of Pine Ridge Forest, the first thing I felt wasn't surprise. It was stillness, the kind that tells you, without drama or noise, that everything has finally landed where it belongs. My name is Corinne Vale. I was 33 years old, standing in the quietest place I knew, and saying yes to a man I'd built a life with. No crowd, no cameras, just us and a vintage ring he remembered I once admired, back when we passed it in a dusty glass case 3 autumns ago. I didn't cry, I just breathed. I thought, this is mine, finally. I waited until the next day to call my mother, Vivian. I thought she'd want every detail. Maybe she'd cry too. Instead, after a few seconds of shallow pleasantries, she asked, "Have you told Emery yet?" Not congratulations. Not tell me everything. Just her voice going soft in the way it always did when Emery was involved. And right there, in the quiet click between our words, I felt it. The cold start of something I didn't want to name yet. But I already knew. That call wasn't a reaction. It was a warning. After that call, I told myself she was just caught off guard. That maybe she'd come around. Maybe, deep down, she was happy for me in her own strange, careful way. I gave her space. I waited. Leo and I started planning. We booked a February wedding at a quiet mountain lodge in Brevard, North Carolina. Intimate, nestled in pine and fog, far from anything that looked like spectacle. We chose burgundy and ivory, a color palette I loved because it felt rooted and unpretentious. We were aiming for 70 guests, just the people who knew us and loved us without caveats. Then Emery announced her engagement. It was exactly 5 weeks after mine. Her post exploded on social media, a sunset rooftop photo with a man I'd never seen before. The caption read, "When you know, you know. Can't wait for January." His name was Zane, a wellness podcaster from Charlotte, apparently. They'd met 2 months ago at a vitamin launch party. I said nothing when I saw it. I said nothing when she booked her venue, a winery 12 miles from ours. I said nothing when she posted a photo of her dress, the lace neckline nearly identical to the one I'd already chosen. Even the florist, mine originally, was tagged in one of her stories. Friends started texting me, "Didn't you already pick that place?" "Wait, that's your dress, right?" I smiled and said it must be a coincidence. Inside, though, something in me coiled, tight and old and too familiar. Not anger, not jealousy, just the aching weight of being overwritten. When we were kids, Emery once told a teacher I'd pushed her down the stairs. I hadn't. She'd slipped on her own. But our mother believed her without question. She always did. That was the beginning of a pattern I spent years pretending wasn't real. And now it was happening again, just dressed in white and filtered through a golden haze of hashtags and fake apologies. Emery's wedding was live-streamed on a Sunday in early January. She had a drone team, a custom filter overlay, and a brand deal with some artisanal gluten-free champagne company. The hashtag, #Emery and Zane Ever After, trended locally. She descended a grand staircase in a gown that could have been mine. Same neckline, same lace. The song playing? A cover of the same ballad I'd once told her I wanted for my own first dance. I watched just long enough to recognize every borrowed detail. Then I shut my laptop and walked outside barefoot into the snow. 6 weeks later, they separated. 2 weeks after that, she filed for divorce, because Zane had been sleeping with her best friend since before the wedding. Emery posted a sobbing story, captioned, "Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who set fire to your world." I didn't comment. I didn't forward it to Leo with a sarcastic quip. I sent her one text, "I'm sorry you're hurting. If you need anything, I'm here." She never answered. But I knew she read it. She always did. By November, Leo and I had finalized every last detail. Venue? Confirmed. Catering? Final tasting approved. The playlist? Curated down to the second. I had the wax-sealed envelopes all lined up on our kitchen table, and I remember thinking, maybe this time things will be okay. Maybe she's moved on. Maybe she'll leave this alone. 2 days later, my phone rang. My mother never calls. She sends brief, clipped texts. But that morning, she dialed me. Her voice was soft, syrupy in the way it always is when she's about to maneuver you into something. "Corinne," she said, "have you Given any thought to scaling back the wedding? I paused mid-fold over a towel. Why would we do that? Well, she continued, with everything Emery's been through, maybe something simpler would be kinder. A church ceremony, immediate family only, just for now. I stared out the window at the dead oak trees. You mean so Emery doesn't have to deal with seeing me happy? She cried all night when she saw your invitation, my mother said. She feels like you're erasing her. Erasing her? That word hit me like cold glass, as if my joy were an act of violence, as if my happiness had to be rationed out, only permitted if it didn't upset the golden daughter. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said calmly, "This wedding is about me and Leo, not Emery. If you really loved your sister," she said, "you'd wait." And then she hung up. I stood there, phone still in hand, heart pounding in that hollow, sharp rhythm I knew too well. That guilt, that old whisper, if someone else is hurting, you must be the reason. I didn't tell Leo immediately. I needed the sting to fade before I spoke it aloud. But that night, he came into the room holding his phone like it was radioactive. "She called me," he said. My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Your mom." He sat beside me, letting out a long breath. "She said I was the level-headed one, that maybe I could convince you to scale things back, said Emery's barely hanging on, that a big wedding would be cruel." He shook his head. "She really believes it, Corinne, that you owe it to Emery to disappear a little." I laughed, just once. It was a bitter sound. "Did you say anything?" I told her no, that we weren't changing a thing. I nodded. My fingers were stiff with tension, but I felt something else too. Not panic, not sadness, something cooler. Clarity. It wasn't just about a venue or a guest list. It was about pattern, control, manipulation wrapped in the language of concern. I'd seen this before, in smaller ways, subtle gestures, quiet rewrites of history. But this was the line. And I was done stepping back so Emery could stay center stage. Thanksgiving came like a slow-moving storm, heavy before it even arrived. Leo told me I didn't have to go. He said we could spend the day hiking, just us. I considered it, but there was a part of me that needed to know, needed to see for myself if things really were as bad as they felt. I wanted to believe that maybe someone in that room would see me. Just once. My Aunt Miranda hosted that year. Her house always smelled like rosemary and burnt pie crust, a scent I associated with safety. The warmth of it hit me the moment we stepped inside. The glow from the fireplace, the clink of dishes, the low hum of family chatter. It was all there. But beneath it ran something else. A tightness, like everyone had agreed to walk gently around one thing, or one person. Emery was already there when we arrived. She sat curled on the couch, in all white, like some broken bride straight from a poem. Her eyes were glossy, lips lightly tinted pink, hair curled just so. She looked like she'd stepped out of a grief-themed catalog shoot. She didn't stand when I entered. She barely looked at me, just a nod, the kind you give a stranger in a waiting room. I greeted her politely. She didn't answer. Everyone else followed her lead. Kind smiles, distant eyes, conversations that curved around me like water around a stone. I became a ghost at my own family table. I sat beside Aunt Miranda and made small talk about flowers, ranunculus or peonies, whether they'd survive a February frost. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Emery stood up. Her voice cracked before it rose. "I can't do this," she said, loud enough to hush the room. "I can't sit here while she talks about that wedding like nothing happened to me." Every sound died. I saw Aunt Denise pause mid-sip. I heard a fork drop. And then my mother stood, fast, like she'd been rehearsing it. "She's right," she said, her voice firm, eyes locked on mine. "You're being incredibly inconsiderate, Corinne. You have no idea what this is doing to your sister." I clenched my hands under the table. My nails bit into my palms. This wasn't new. This was the script. Emery performs. Mom backs her. Everyone else nods and looks away. But I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not again. I stood up slowly. This wedding, I said, voice calm, is not about Emery. It never was. Emery's face twisted like she'd been slapped. You've always thought you were better than me, she spat. I looked at my mother, silently pleading for something. Maybe fairness, maybe reality. She turned her face away. That silence broke something inside me. Not in the way that shatters, in the way that frees. Leo drove us home in near silence. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I stared out the window as the trees blurred past in the dark. I stayed up that night long after he'd fallen asleep. I lay on my back, eyes wide open, watching the ceiling as if it held answers. I replayed every word, every glance, every silence, and I felt something shift. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was done. By morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open. My coffee had gone cold. I typed the email slowly, deliberately, not a syllable of spite, just precision, like filing a final report. Mom, Emery. Over the past several months, I've tried to remain respectful, even as you crossed lines I never consented to. The events at Thanksgiving confirmed what I can no longer ignore. For the sake of my mental peace and the integrity of this wedding, I'm formally rescinding your invitations. I wish you both healing, but I will not allow this pattern to continue into the next chapter of my life. Corinne, I hit send. My hands shook, but beneath that tremble was something steadier, a quiet kind of freedom. Around noon, my mother replied. I never thought my daughter would betray her own family. You've chosen a man over your blood. If your father were alive, he'd be ashamed. There it was. Her oldest weapon. Guilt sharpened on memory. I didn't reply. That evening, Emery's email arrived. It was messy, chaotic. She accused me of cruelty, of jealousy, of trying to ruin her healing. She said I was punishing her for feeling things too deeply. The last line? You'll regret this. One day you'll realize you destroyed this family. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't absorbing it. I was out of range. The week before the wedding felt strangely calm, like the eye of a storm I hadn't quite escaped. The venue confirmed everything twice over. My maid of honor, Amanda, checked the timeline down to the minute. Leo made sure all vendor payments cleared. We kept moving, deliberate, steady, focused. We didn't speak of my mother, or Emery, not out loud. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, Leo got a text. He showed it to me without a word. It was from Emery. Hey, I know things are tense. I don't know who to talk to. You've always been kind to me. I stared at the screen. Why is she texting you? Leo looked at me, calm but wary. I don't know. We agreed to ignore it. Maybe it was just a stray attempt to provoke a reaction. But then another message came. Then another. Corinne doesn't really see you, you know. You're everything she's not. You actually listen. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different if we'd met first. Each one was more polished than the last. Emotional, intimate, manipulative, in that syrupy tone Emery had perfected since we were kids. It wasn't impulsive. It was rehearsed. Leo didn't reply. He just kept showing them to me, quietly, no drama. But with every message, something inside me stilled further. I wasn't even shocked. She didn't just want to sabotage the wedding. She wanted what she couldn't control. By Friday, she sent the final one. I know it's wrong, but I can't stop thinking about you. I think there's something between us, Leo. Please don't pretend there isn't. That was when I opened my laptop again. I attached every screenshot, every timestamp, and I wrote another email. No emotion, just truth. Mom, I hope this helps explain why Emery is no longer welcome at the wedding. I will not discuss this again. Corinne. Her reply came an hour later. You're misinterpreting her pain. You've made this all about you. Again. I stared at those lines for a long time. Not because they hurt, because they didn't surprise me. My mother didn't want to see what was right in front of her, because if she did, she'd have to face the fact that she'd allowed it. She'd fed it. It was easier to pretend her favorite daughter was just misunderstood than admit she had raised someone who would torch another person's life just to feel warm. The morning of the wedding came wrapped in snow. The mountain air was clean and sharp. My dress hung by the window like a memory I hadn't touched yet. I stood in my robe, sipping coffee, watching frost climb across the glass. I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. We'd planned a first look in the garden. Leo waited by the arbor, hands in his pockets, wearing the coat I loved most on him, navy with that faint herringbone pattern. When I stepped outside and saw him, everything else dropped away. This was it, our moment, untouched. Until Amanda came running into the bridal suite, face pale. "They're here," she said, breath catching. "Your mom, Emery, they're at the gate." I didn't answer right away. "What do you mean, at the gate?" "Security stopped them, but they're refusing to leave. Your mom's crying, Emery's yelling, she's calling you a narcissist, she's screaming that you're tearing the family apart." I sat down slowly. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. I just thought. I could have gone out there, could have delivered some grand speech, could have screamed, but that would have made them the center again, the stars of a new scene they didn't deserve. I looked Amanda in the eye. "Tell security to hold the line." She nodded and disappeared. I heard the echoes of shouting down the hill, something about betrayal, something about shame. I didn't catch the words. I didn't need to. I was already walking toward Leo. The ceremony began on time. I didn't look at the entrance once. I looked at the man who never flinched, even when my past came clawing through the present. We said our vows beneath cedar beams and warm lights, and when we kissed, the world finally went quiet. The ceremony began right on time. I didn't glance toward the entrance. I didn't wonder if they were still outside. I looked only at Leo, at the man who had stood by me, calmly, loyally, even when my family tried to turn him into collateral damage. We said our vows beneath cedar beams and soft twinkle lights. And when I looked out at our guests, I didn't see who was missing. I saw who had stayed. Later, someone mentioned that my mother and Emery had been escorted off the property, that my mother wept as the staff guided her out, that Emery screamed something about betrayal and legacy and destroying everything. I don't know. I didn't hear it. I was too busy dancing. When we returned to our suite after midnight, my hair was undone, my shoes forgotten under the table, my dress slightly wrinkled but perfect in every way that mattered. I checked my phone out of habit. 12 missed calls, 9 voicemails, all from my mother. I didn't listen to a single one. I placed the phone in the drawer, turned off the lamp, and fell asleep next to my husband, no longer a fiancé, and not, in any sense that mattered, still a daughter waiting to be chosen. The next morning, while we packed for our short honeymoon in Asheville, my cousin Sasha called. Her voice was hushed, almost thrilled. "They fought," she said. "Last night. Full screaming match. Emery and your mom. Apparently, Emery blamed her for not stopping the wedding, said she should have tried harder, that this was all her fault." I didn't respond. I just sat on the edge of the bed and listened. "She told Emery to grow up," Sasha continued. "Told her to stop making everything a tragedy, and then she kicked her out. Like, out. Emery's staying with a friend now, but honestly, no one's running after her." I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. For 33 years, I'd bent to keep peace. I'd made myself small so someone else could feel seen. I'd softened my joy so no one else had to sit in their own shadows. And now, finally, I had stepped out of the frame. And they had turned on each other. It wasn't revenge. It was gravity. At the reception, we'd left a single seat open by the fireplace. A name card rested quietly on the cushion. Emery Vale. It stayed empty all night. No one asked. No one tried to fill it. And somehow, that silence, that absence, felt like the most honest moment of the entire day.